Layla Monroe found her name on a company she had never formed. In the folder she was carrying on her way to sign a $220 million contract. She did not call her lawyer. She did not turn around. She walked into that building anyway, because the question she needed to ask could only be asked inside the room. The receptionist stopped her at the door before she could ask it. That was the mistake Carter Webb would spend everything he had built to pay for. Before we go any further, we'd love for you to hit that subscribe button. Your support means the world to us, and it helps us bring you even more powerful stories. Now let's begin. The kitchen light in Layla Monroe's house on Walnut Grove Road came on at 6:12 every weekday morning, which was earlier than necessary and later than she was already awake. She had been a light sleeper since Dion was born 13 years ago, and the habit of waking before the alarm had never left her even after he stopped needing her to. She made coffee with the particular efficiency of someone who has run the same sequence so many times that her hands know the order before her mind does. Dion came downstairs at 6:40 in the hoodie he wore every morning regardless of season, poured cereal, and asked whether the meeting today was the big one. It is, she told him. How big? She smiled at him over her mug. $220 million big. He considered this with the gravity of a 13-year-old who understood that numbers like that were real, but had not yet learned to be impressed by them in the way that fear teaches you to be impressed by things. Then he asked whether he needed to sign anything for the math competition on Friday, and she said yes. And he said where, and she pointed to the counter, and he signed it, without looking at it, and went back to his cereal. Layla set her mug down and opened the folder on the kitchen table. It was a habit, reviewing documents in the quiet before the day began, when she had full attention and no interruptions. The folder held the final bid package for the Memphis Water Infrastructure Rehabilitation Project, the largest municipal contract the city had issued in 23 years. 6 firms had submitted proposals. 5 had been eliminated through technical review. 1 remained, Apex Infrastructure Partners, headquartered in the Commerce Center Tower on 2nd Avenue downtown. She had read the Apex proposal 3 times. She knew its structure the way she knew the layout of her own office. Not just the content, but the reasoning behind every number, every staffing projection, every subcontractor line. She turned to Appendix D, Minority and Disadvantaged Business Enterprise Utilization Report. A list of 14 companies, each with a percentage, an address, a contact name. She scanned down the column the way she always scanned columns, quickly, looking for the shape of things, before reading the details. She stopped at line 9. Monroe Civic LLC. 4417, Beale Avenue, Memphis, Tennessee. Subcontractor services, civil engineering support. Projected utilization, 8%. Layla read the line twice. Then she sat very still for a moment. 4417, Beale Avenue was the address of the apartment she had rented for 3 years before buying this house. She had given up the lease 5 years ago. The woman who currently lived there was named Patricia Osei and taught 4th grade at a school in Midtown, and had, as far as Layla knew, no connection to infrastructure procurement or civil engineering or anything in between. Monroe Civic LLC was not a company Layla had registered, not under that name or any other. She had never invoiced Apex Infrastructure Partners. She had never invoiced anyone for engineering services. She had a law degree and a city director's title and a son with a math competition on Friday. She read the line a 3rd time. Then she closed the folder. She picked up her coffee, which had gone slightly cold, and drank the rest of it. She put Dion's permission slip in her bag. She kissed the top of his head and told him she would be at pickup. She did not call her lawyer. Not yet. She took her city badge from the hook by the door, looked at it for a moment, and put it in her coat pocket instead of around her neck. She picked up the folder. She walked to her car. The question she could only be asked in the room. The Commerce Center Tower on 2nd Avenue was the kind of building that communicated its purpose before you were close enough to read any signage. Glass and pale limestone, 42 floors, a revolving door that moved with the weighted deliberateness of something that had been engineered to convey significance. Layla had been in buildings like this for 17 years of city work, and she had long since stopped being impressed by lobbies that spent money on marble. She arrived at 9:19 a.m. The lobby was large enough that her footsteps made a sound she could hear, which was the point of marble floors in buildings like this one, to make arrivals audible, to signal that you had entered a space that would notice you. The flower arrangement on the reception counter was white lilies in a glass cylinder, the kind of arrangement that existed to scent a room rather than to be looked at. The receptionist was young, 27, maybe, with dark hair pulled back, an Apex Infrastructure Partners lanyard around her neck, and the posture of someone who had been told that her desk was the face of the organization. She was looking at her screen when Layla approached. She looked up. The evaluation took less than 2 seconds. Layla had been on the receiving end of evaluations, that fast for long enough to recognize them in the brief rearrangement of a stranger's expression, the slight shift from neutral to something that had already made a decision. "Good morning," Layla said. "I have a 9:30 with Mr. Webb." Layla Monroe. The receptionist, her name tag read Ashley, turned to her screen. She scrolled. She scrolled again. "I'm not finding you in the system." "Try Monroe, Monroe." Ashley scrolled from the beginning. Slowly, not so slowly that it was obviously theatrical, but slowly enough. "No, I'm sorry. I don't have a Monroe on the 9:30. Could you call up to Mr. Webb's office and confirm?" Ashley lifted the phone. She held it for a moment, then set it back down. "I tried the extension. No answer. The meeting may have been rescheduled." Her voice carried the particular register of someone delivering a conclusion they had arrived at before the conversation began. "Do you have a written confirmation? An email?" Layla opened her coat and produced the folder. She opened it to the cover sheet. The formal meeting request, date stamped, bearing the city seal, and the signatures of both her office and Apex's executive assistant. She placed it on the counter. Ashley looked at it. "Not long. I'd need to verify this with the assistant directly. She's not answering right now." She slid the paper back across the counter. "Our policy is that unverified appointments can't be processed at the front desk. You're welcome to wait in the side atrium. That's through the hall on the left for guests who are pending verification. I'd prefer to wait here. The main lobby is reserved for confirmed visitors and staff." She said this with the pleasant firmness of someone reciting a rule they have practiced. The side atrium has seating and water. Layla kept her hands flat on the counter. She did not lean forward. "I'm a confirmed visitor. The documentation is right in front of you. I understand that, but without direct verbal confirmation from upstairs, then please try upstairs again." Ashley picked up the phone. This time she appeared to dial. She listened. She set the phone down. Still no answer. "I'm sorry." She looked past Layla's shoulder for a moment, reflexively, at nothing in particular, and then looked back. "There's really nothing I can do at this point. The side atrium, I'll wait here." A silence settled between them. It was not a comfortable silence. It was the silence of two people who have each understood what the other one is doing and have decided not to say it out loud. At the far end of the lobby, a group of 5 people in tailored clothing came through the revolving door. Ashley looked up, smiled, reached under the counter, and buzzed them through the glass security door without checking anything. The door swung open and closed behind them. Layla watched this. Ashley turned back. Her voice had dropped into something quieter and more pointed. "Look, I can't hold the lobby for people who don't have confirmed access. If you're still here in 5 minutes, I'm going to have to call building security. That's just procedure." Layla looked past Ashley's shoulder at the directory board mounted on the wall behind the desk. It was brushed metal, lit from behind, the names of tenant companies arranged by floor in clean sans serif type. She read down the list. Apex Infrastructure Partners, floors 17 through 20. Her eyes moved to the next entry. Monroe Civic LLC, Suite 1803. Suite 1803. Floor 18. Apex's floor. She stood with that information for 3 seconds. 3 full seconds, which was enough time to understand several things simultaneously. That the company bearing her name was not just registered somewhere in the city, but was listed as a tenant on the same floor as Apex Infrastructure Partners, which meant it had a physical address in a building managed by Apex, which meant it was not a distant shell, but something housed close enough to be checked on and controlled, and that the receptionist currently threatening to call building security. had been positioned between anyone reading that directory and anyone who might ask questions about what was on it. "I'll wait outside," Layla said. Ashley blinked. "Outside." On the sidewalk. She picked up the folder. "Tell Mr. Webb I'm there when he's ready." She walked to the revolving door, which pushed her out onto 2nd Avenue, with the unhurried rotation of something that did not know or care what was happening inside it. The morning air was cold and smelled of car exhaust and the distant river. Layla stood on the sidewalk, with the folder under her arm and her city badge in her coat pocket, and looked at the glass face of the building for a moment. Inside, she saw Ashley pick up her personal phone and begin typing. Layla took out her own phone. She called her assistant. "Rebook the 9:30. Tell Webb's office I had an unexpected conflict. I'll reach out to reschedule." Then she called Renee Odom. Renee picked up on the second ring, which meant she was already at her desk. She was always already at her desk. "I need to talk," Layla said. "Not for print. Not yet." "Where?" "The place on Vance." "Half an hour. 20 minutes, Renee said, and hung up. Renee Odom had been covering city procurement for the Memphis Commercial Appeal for 18 years, which meant she had been watching the way public money moved through private hands for long enough to recognize the sound of a thread worth pulling before she could see what it was attached to. She was 46, compact, with reading glasses she kept on her head, unless she was actually reading something, and 3 notebooks in her bag at all times, because she did not trust digital records the way she trusted handwriting. She was already in a booth when Layla arrived, a black coffee in front of her, and nothing on the table. She looked at the folder Layla set between them and said nothing while Layla talked. When Layla finished, Renee opened the folder to Appendix D. She read line 9. She read it again. She pulled on her glasses and looked at the registered address. She took off her glasses. "Monroe Civic LLC is on their directory board," she said. "As a tenant. Suite 1803. Their floor. They're not just using your name. They're keeping the company in their own building. Which means they need to be able to control it. Answer phones if anyone calls. Produce documents if anyone asks." Renee was quiet for a moment. "How long do I have?" "The bid review deadline is in 40 days. After that, the council votes. I'm the signing authority. I'm not signing anything until I know what this is." Renee opened the first of her 3 notebooks. "I'll start tonight." What Renee found in the following days arrived in layers, each one fitting against the previous one the way pieces fit when the picture has been assembled by someone who knew what it was supposed to look like before they started. Monroe Civic LLC had been registered with the Tennessee Secretary of State 2 years and 7 months earlier. The principal officer listed on the formation documents was Layla R. Monroe. Layla's middle initial was D. The registered agent was a paralegal service operating from a strip mall in Bartlett, 12 miles from downtown. The mailing address was a post office box in Shelby County. The company had invoiced Apex Infrastructure Partners quarterly since its formation. The invoices described services as civil engineering subcontractor support. The amounts ranged from $94,000 to $147,000 per quarter. Every invoice had been paid within 5 business days, routed first to the P.O. Box LLC, then to a second company registered in Fayette County, then to a third account that required a subpoena to trace further. Apex had booked every payment against their minority and disadvantaged business enterprise quota. Without that quota, which required that at least 18% of contract value flow to certified minority-owned firms, Apex was ineligible to bid on public contracts in Memphis and in 2 neighboring counties. Without Monroe Civic and 2 other shell companies, Renee's FOIA requests were beginning to surface. Apex had not qualified to bid on 14 of the last 17 public contracts they had won. The total value of those contracts was $847 million over 3 years. Monroe Civic alone had been paid $1.03 million. Renee called Layla at 9:15 on a Thursday evening, with these numbers in her second notebook. There was a long pause on the line after she finished reading them. "They didn't just use my name," Layla said finally. "No, they used my name to displace firms that actually exist, companies owned by actual people who actually bid on those contracts. And lost," Renee said. "Because Apex had a quota advantage that was fabricated." Another pause. "Find me the inside. I'm working on it." The inside found them first. Renee received a message through her newsroom's encrypted tip line at 11:47 p.m. on a Friday, 3 weeks into the investigation. The sender identified themselves only as Apex Internal Accounting. The message contained 4 words and a phone number. Asterisk, I have the original. Asterisk, she called the number the following morning from a payphone, one of 3 remaining in downtown Memphis, outside a hospital on Union Avenue. It rang 4 times. Then a man's voice, careful and slightly hoarse, said, Miss Marsden? Odom, she said. Renee Odom. Who is this? A pause. My name is Marcus Tillman. I work in accounting at Apex. I've been working there for 3 years. Another pause, longer. My wife is sick. Cancer. We're in the middle of her 2nd round of chemo. The insurance through Apex is the only reason we can afford it. Renee said nothing. She let him find his own way to the next sentence. 14 months ago, Marcus continued, I was doing a quarterly reconciliation and I found discrepancies in the Monroe Civic invoices. The services described didn't match any work product I could locate. The payment routing was unusual. I did some digging and I found the formation documents. He stopped. The registered officer wasn't who they said it was. I knew the name. Everybody in procurement in this city knows the name Layla Monroe. What did you do? I made copies. Everything I could access. Invoices, routing records, the formation document, internal email threads referencing Monroe Civic. I put it on a drive. A pause. And then I put the drive in the drawer of my desk at home, and I didn't touch it. Renee pressed the phone against her ear. The hospital across the street hummed with morning activity. For 14 months. My wife needed the insurance. I understand. I kept telling myself someone else would find it. The city would audit. A regulator would ask. His voice was very quiet. Nobody asked. Until now, Renee said. Until you sent the FOIA requests. When I heard about that, someone at the city was asking questions, I thought maybe. He stopped again. Miss Odom, my wife's treatment ends in 6 weeks. After that, I don't need their insurance anymore. Renee closed her eyes for a moment. She had been in this work long enough to understand the specific weight of a sentence like that, what it meant about what he had been carrying, and what it meant that he was setting it down now. Mr. Tillman, are you aware of the False Claims Act? I've heard of it. Under federal whistleblower provisions, if you come forward with documentation of government contract fraud, you're protected from retaliation. And you may be entitled to a percentage of any funds recovered. She paused. You should talk to a lawyer before you do anything. Tonight if you can. I can give you a name. A long silence on the line. She could hear him breathing. How much of a percentage? Typically 15 to 30% of what the government recovers. Another silence. They paid Monroe Civic over $1 million. That's one company, Renee said. There are 2 others we're still tracing. He was quiet for a long time. When he spoke again, his voice had changed, not louder, but cleaner. The sound of a decision that has been made and is no longer up for review. I'll call the lawyer tonight. Good. Renee paused. Mr. Tillman, the drive in your desk at home. Is it still there? Yes. Don't touch it until you've talked to a lawyer. Then bring it to me. He brought it 4 days later, on a Tuesday morning, to a diner on Poplar Avenue. He was 34, broad-shouldered, with the kind of stillness that comes from holding something in for a long time. He set a small silver USB drive on the table between them. His hands were steady. Whatever shaking he might have done, he had done before he arrived. Layla was there. She looked at the drive for a moment, then at Marcus. Your wife's name is Tanya, she said. He looked up. How do you know that? Renee told me. She paused. Is she going to be all right? He looked at the table, then at Layla. The doctors say the odds are good. If we finish the treatment. You'll finish the treatment, Layla said. She said it the way she said things she had already made certain of. She moved on to the drive, before he could ask her what she meant. The contents of the drive required 3 days for Renee's forensic accountant, a woman named Paulette, who worked nights in Raleigh, and had a methodical precision that Renee had trusted for 11 years to analyze and organize. When she called, with results at 7 a.m. on a Saturday, Renee was already at her desk. Your 3 shell companies, Paulette said, paid a total of $2. $1 million to Apex over 31 months. Every payment is here, every routing slip, every memo line. The trail runs through 5 LLCs across 3 counties. She paused. And then it gets interesting. Go. The final account, the one all the money ends up in, is registered to a holding company that made political contributions last cycle. One to a Shelby County Commissioner who sits on the Contracts Review Board. One to a state senator on the Infrastructure Committee. Renee wrote both names in her second notebook. How clean is the trail? It's a straight line, Paulette said. Drawn with a ruler. 3 sources. 3 separate bodies of evidence assembled from different directions by people who had not known each other existed until 10 days before the council hearing. Renee had built a timeline from her FOIA records. Marcus had built a timeline from his internal audit. The forensic accountant had built a timeline from the drive. All 3 timelines produced the same dates. Not the same month. Not the same week. The same dates. Renee taped the 3 columns side by side on the newsroom wall and stood in front of them with her arms crossed and her reading glasses on. Then she called Layla. We have them, she said. Ashley Greer's email arrived in Layla's inbox at 11:23 p.m. on a Thursday, 3.5 weeks after the morning in the lobby. It came from a personal account, not her Apex address. The subject line was blank. Asterisk Ms. Monroe, I know I'm not someone you want to hear from. I was told to screen certain visitors. I was told to use judgment about who to redirect to the side entrance. The instruction came through text from Mr. Webb's assistant. I kept the messages. I kept them because I knew what kind of instruction it was, and I knew that someday someone would want to say I made it up on my own. I don't want to be the person they blame for all of this. I know what I did in that lobby. I'm not asking you to forgive it. I'm asking for the chance to say what I actually know. Asterisk. Layla read it twice. Then she replied. Asterisk Monday, 9 a.m. City Hall, 6th floor. Bring the phone and the SIM card. I'll have a name for you. Before then, if you need legal counsel. Asterisk. She hit send and sat back in her chair. Renee, sitting across the desk, looked at her. She's scared. She should be, Layla said. But she's also right that they'll try to put it on her. She paused. She kept the messages because she knew. That's not nothing. The Memphis City Council chamber held 70 seats on a Tuesday afternoon in March, and every one of them was occupied. The air smelled of old wood and forced air heating and the specific tension of a room full of people who understood that something significant was about to be formally decided. Carter Webb was sworn in first. He wore a navy suit. His attorney sat 2 chairs to his left. When the council chair asked whether he was familiar with Monroe Civic LLC, Webb said he was aware of the name. When asked when he had first become aware, he said during the director's administrative inquiry. When the chair showed him the internal email thread forwarded from his assistant to the reception desk, subject line, lobby protocol, reminder, he said he received a great deal of correspondence and did not specifically recall. Marcus Tillman was sworn second. He sat at the witness table with his hands folded in front of him and spoke without notes because the facts were in him now and did not require prompting. He described the discrepancy he had found 14 months earlier. He described the drive and what was on it. He described the routing of the payments. When Webb's attorney objected to the chain of custody, the council chair noted the objection and asked Marcus to continue. He continued. Ashley Greer was sworn third. She was pale and held herself carefully, the posture of someone who has made a decision and is trying not to let the weight of it show. She produced her phone. She read the text messages aloud into the microphone in the order they had been sent. Webb's assistant had used the word types in reference to visitors who should be redirected. Ashley had replied, asterisk got it. Will handle. Asterisk there were 7 exchanges in the thread over 14 months. The first was dated 3 weeks after Monroe Civic LLC appeared on Apex's FOIA-produced minority vendor list for the previous fiscal year. When she finished, she looked at the table. She did not look at Webb. The chamber was quiet enough that the ventilation system was audible. Layla was sworn last. She walked to the witness table with the navy folder under her arm and sat down without adjusting the microphone. She opened the folder. She did not look at notes. Council members, she said, I want to be brief and I want to be precise because the record matters more than any commentary I might add to it. She named the 3 sources. She named the dates they had independently produced. She named the companies, the routing accounts, the amounts. She did not raise her voice. She did not look at Webb. She stated each fact as a fact, without decoration, and allowed the weight of their accumulation to do the work that no tone of voice could have done more effectively. When she finished, she folded her hands on the folder and waited. The vote was 7-0. Apex Infrastructure Partners was barred from bidding on public contracts in Memphis and referred to the Shelby County District Attorney for investigation of government contract fraud. The political contribution recipients were referred to the State Ethics Commission. The gavel came down once. In the corridor outside, Webb's attorney handed Layla a business card for a restructuring firm. She looked at it, put it in her coat pocket, and did not look at it again. Marcus Tillman received his whistleblower determination 6 weeks after the hearing. The recovery proceeding against Apex and its associated entities was ongoing, but the initial federal determination confirmed his protected status and established his eligibility for a share of funds recovered. His attorney called him at home on a Friday morning. He was in the kitchen. Tanya was at the table, 3 days out from her final chemotherapy session, drinking tea in the careful way of someone whose body is beginning to remember what it was like before. She watched his face while he was on the phone. When he hung up, he sat down across from her and did not speak for a moment. She reached across the table and put her hand over his. He said, "We're going to be okay." She looked at him. "I know," she said. "I've been knowing." 5 months after the morning on 2nd Avenue, Layla Monroe walked through the revolving door of the Commerce Center Tower on a Thursday afternoon. The lobby had been rebranded, new signage, new management company, the glass security door replaced with a standard visitor check-in counter staffed by a man who smiled when she entered and said her name before she gave it. She walked to the directory board. The board had been redone in matte black. She read down the floors. Apex Infrastructure Partners was no longer listed. Most of the floors had new tenants, smaller firms, a consulting company, a regional architecture practice. The floor numbers ran in order from 2 to 42. Line 4 from the top, where Monroe Civic LLC had been, was blank. A clean rectangle of matte black, where a name had been removed. No replacement yet. Just the space where the thing had been. Layla looked at it for a moment. She thought about Appendix D. She thought about a kitchen table at 6:40 in the morning and a folder she almost didn't open one more time. She thought about Marcus in a diner on Poplar Avenue, setting a silver drive on the table with steady hands. She thought about Ashley's email arriving at 11:23 p.m. with a blank subject line. She took her city badge out of her coat pocket. She put it around her neck. She did not tuck it inside her collar. Then she walked to the elevator. She had a meeting on the 20th floor, a new firm, a legitimate bid on a flood control project in a neighborhood that had been asking for one since before Dion was born. She had read every page of their proposal twice and found nothing in the appendixes that shouldn't be there. The elevator doors opened. She stepped in. The city badge caught the light as the doors closed. Narrator reflection. What Carter Webb built required 2 things to work: a name that would not be examined and a door that would stop anyone who might examine it. The name was Layla Monroe's, taken from public records, slightly altered, attached to a company she had never seen, housed on a floor she had never visited. The logic was not complicated. A black woman's name on a minority vendor form would not be questioned the way a firm with no documented history would be questioned, because the assumption, unspoken, systematic, and entirely wrong, was that such firms existed and such people were, where you expected to find them, available to be used, unlikely to push back. The door was Ashley Greer, not because Ashley was malicious, but because she had been given an instruction framed as discretion and had applied it the way instructions framed as discretion get applied, according to the instincts that the environment had trained into her. She was not the architect of the system. She was the mechanism by which the system maintained itself at the point of contact. This distinction matters because it is the distinction that most such systems rely on. The people who design mechanisms of exclusion rarely operate them directly. They create protocols and use polite language and allow other people to make the choices that need to be made, which distributes the moral responsibility in ways that make accountability difficult. According to the Minority Business Development Agency, Shell company fraud in public procurement costs American municipalities an estimated $2 to $8 billion annually. The firms that lose contracts to Shell-padded bids are real companies owned by real people. They submit proposals, hire staff to prepare them, and lose not because their work was inferior, but because the competitor they were evaluated against had fabricated a qualification advantage. Layla Monroe knew her name was on that company before she walked into the lobby. She went in anyway because the only way to ask the question was to be in the room where the answer lived. She was stopped at the door. She stood on the sidewalk and thought about what she had seen on the directory board. Then she went and found the people who had been waiting for someone to ask. Marcus Tillman held a USB drive in a desk drawer for 14 months because his wife needed cancer treatment and the insurance came from the company he was protecting. That is not a comfortable thing to sit with, his silence and his fear and his love for Tanya and the specific math of a person calculating what they can afford to do. But he did not leave. He did not destroy the drive. He kept it. And when the moment came, he answered. There is a version of this story that ends with Layla winning because she was powerful enough to push back. But the actual story ends the way it does because 3 people did 3 things that cost them something real. A woman who found her name on a document she never signed walked into a building instead of away from it. A man who was afraid for his wife's life answered a phone call. A receptionist who understood she was about to be made into a scapegoat wrote an email at 11:23 at night. None of them knew the other 2 existed when they made their choices. That is what the story is actually about. Disclaimer: this story is a work of fiction created for entertainment and reflective purposes. The characters, companies, and events depicted are entirely invented. The procurement fraud practices described, including Shell company fraud and minority vendor certification programs, reflect documented patterns in public contracting across the United States. The False Claims Act, the Minority Business Development Agency's certification programs, and FOIA procedures referenced in this story are real legal mechanisms available to the public. If you suspect government contract fraud, the U.S. Department of Justice's False Claims Act information is available at justice.gov, and the MBDA's fraud reporting resources are at mda.gov. If you are a public employee or private contractor who has witnessed procurement fraud, the Government Accountability Project's whistleblower resources are at whistleblower.org. Stories like this one are fictional. The systems they describe are not. If this story stayed with you, hit that subscribe button and share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Drop a comment below. Tell us, have you ever found your name on something you never signed? Or been the person who kept a drive in a drawer, waiting for the right moment? We read every response. See you in the next story.